Welcome to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Thursday, January 23, 1941. Henry Chopp reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:11 a.m. It set at 4:54 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, partly cloudy, increasing to cloudy Thursday afternoon. Friday cloudy, light to moderate snow and colder with cold wave Friday night. Moderate northerly winds veering to northeast or east Thursday night. The high temperature 42 degrees, the low temperature 26. Today's headline, Civil War rages in Romania. British capture Tobruk, sees thousands, eyewitness story. Sofia, Bulgaria, January 23rd. Civil war between Romanian Iron Guard extremists and regular army units of Chief of State General Ion Antonescu spread rapidly throughout German-dominated Romania today. News dispatches from Bucharest to Sofia and Belgrade, Yugoslavia, said several hundred persons probably had been killed in bitter fighting in the streets of Bucharest and other cities. The rebels claimed more than 30,000 men were fighting on their side. The rebels also were said to be claiming the ascendancy in most cities in Romania and Transylvania. The remnant left to Romania last year in an Axis enforced settlement with Hungary. Romania's neighbors were nervous. Hungary, it was reported, called up more troops, and the Turkish cabinet met to discuss the situation. Romanian troops at Craiova, Jassy, and Constanta were reported to have joined the revolt, and at Galați and Brăila, extremists overpowered and disarmed regular troops. The Iron Guard was organized in Romania by Corneliu Cadrianu as a pro-Nazi organization, and since his death has been held by Hora Sima, vice premier. Differences have developed within the organization, and the extremists, calling themselves also Cordrianis and Legionnaires, opposed the Sima faction and Antonescu. Sima was reported in Berlin or on his way there to confer with Nazi leaders. Martial law was proclaimed by Antonescu, who was reported to have only the support of troops unfriendly to the Iron Guard extremists. His ultimatum Tuesday night for the restoration of order in 24 hours and renewed exhortations yesterday appeared to have had little effect. Bucharest was reported to be in a virtual state of siege, as were other principal cities. Extremists in Bucharest were reported holding the post office, several ministries, and the central telephone exchange. Over the Bucharest radio, which they seized, the extremists announced that Romanian Air Force units at one point had joined in the revolt. Speaking over the radio, the rebels appealed to troops in Bucharest not to fire on the extremists. The radio said the extremists were ready to die like our captain, meaning Codreanu, who was killed in 1938. Reports from Brasov, north of Bucharest, said the extremist leader, General Dragalina, was marching to Bucharest with troops. Other sources said General Dragalina commanded an army corps. Romanian censorship sought to control district news of developments, but one diplomatic source in Belgrade said Franklin Mott Gunther, American minister to Bucharest, was suddenly cut. Belgrade, Yugoslavia, January 22nd. 6 Dalmatian fishermen were wounded today when 3 mines adrift in a heavy sea exploded near Budva, Yugoslavia, on the Adriatic coast. Cairo, Egypt, January 22nd. The fall of the major Italian-Libyan base of Tobruk to the British African Army was announced officially tonight. Mopping up operations continued in the town's western defenses alone. The remainder of the defenses are in our hands, said a military communique. Australian shock troops led the forces storming Tobruk, which is 80 miles inside Libya. They entered the town at noon after more than 24 hours of violent attack upon its fortifications by British troops, warships, and bombers. Thousands of Italians, no precise count had been made, already had been reported captured. An estimated 30,000 of them were garrisoned in the town before the attack began. Above the town tonight, smoke rose over the rubble left by the shells pumped into it so long. The general assault began early yesterday morning. Free French troops fought beside the British and Australians. By sunset yesterday, just 12 hours after loosing the attack, the British were 8 miles within the defenses and firmly established on cliffs overlooking the Tobruk harbor 3 miles away. The initial gaps in the Italian defense lines had by that time been widened to 5 miles. On two other fronts far away in East Africa, as far as 2,000 miles, the Italians were withdrawing today, said reports reaching British military headquarters here. Two Italian divisions, which had held Kassala in the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan and the nearby frontier posts, were said to have withdrawn more than 40 miles inside Italian Eritrea, with the British still in pursuit. The other Italian retreat reported was along the southern frontier of Ethiopia. Fascist detachments that had penetrated into British Kenya some months ago were declared to be moving back under harassment by British patrols. Rome, January 22nd. Indications of further German assistance for the Italian army in Libya appeared tonight after the High Command acknowledged that Tobruk's defenses had been punctured by Britain's Army of the Nile. Premier Mussolini's newspaper Il Popolo d'Italia said the Italian-German allies were fighting the British wherever this enemy seeks to strike and offer itself to the blows of the two Axis armies. The Daily War Bulletin said Tobruk's lines were pierced after a heavy air artillery and land bombardment yesterday. On the East African front, the Italians said British motorized columns were halted with heavy losses at predetermined points. Tobruk battlefield, January 21st, delayed. Italy's second stronghold in eastern Libya, the fortified perimeter of the Tobruk area, cracked at dawn today before a brilliantly executed British and Australian attack. Once inside the rim, the storming unit speedily turned to the cleanup of the area of some 100 square miles enclosed by it. Although preparations for the attack had gone on openly since the British laid siege to the area 2 weeks ago, the Italians apparently were taken by surprise. Many of the fascists were found sleeping in dugouts and marched at bayonet point from their beds to the prisoners' lines. Premier Mussolini's forces appeared routed at all points of contact. As in Bardia, the Italian artillerymen stood up as long as they could hammer the British from a distance. Throughout the day's fighting, not a single Italian plane appeared overhead, nor did the Italian fleet venture out to aid the trapped and harassed fascist soldiers. Tonight, meaning Tuesday, the sky was red over the region as munitions dumps and oil stores exploded and went up in flames. Athens, Greece, January 22nd. Violent Italian counterattacks directed at stopping the Greek advance in the central sector of the Albanian battlefront have been repulsed with heavy losses to the fascists, a Greek spokesman said today. Newly won positions, both in the central and coastal sectors, will prove beneficial for future Greek operations, the spokesman said. Greek gains were reported near Tepelini and on the northern end of the front. In the central area fighting, 200 Italians were taken prisoners, it was said. An air attack by the British on Elbasan in central Albania caused big explosions around military objectives, an RAF communique asserted. A railroad track and other military objectives were struck, the communique reported. All planes returned from the attack despite vigorous anti-aircraft fire by the Italians, it added. Rome, January 22nd. Italian warplanes were reported by the High Command today to have carried out bombing attacks on the Greek naval base at Preveza on the Aegean ports of Salonika and Volos and the island of Corfu. Greek lines of supply, troop concentrations, anti-aircraft batteries, and artillery emplacements were said to have been dive-bombed with the greatest intensity by Italian planes. The newspaper Il Giornale d'Italia reported today that Salonika, Volos, and Preveza were attacked heavily because air scouts had noticed reserve troops and supplies were massed at those bases. Struga, Yugoslavia, January 22nd. Reports from the Albanian front today said the Greeks were fortifying their lines in expectation of an Italian counteroffensive as a result of the reported arrival of 18 new Italian divisions. Greek sources said their information indicated the new divisions were light units of 7,000 or 8,000 men each, ferried to Albania in the last 25 days in planes and ships. Athens, Greece, January 22nd. The Greek Air Force reported tonight the destruction by bombers of an entire Italian convoy of more than 100 trucks on the central Albanian front. Italian troops also were bombed and machine gunned, it was stated. The transport column was said to have been smashed after a Greek bomb had dislodged a great boulder which rolled into the road, blocking a narrow mountain pass and enabling the Greek planes to pour bombs upon the trapped trucks. With the British Mediterranean Fleet, January 22nd, a British destroyer recently captured two 400-ton Italian motor schooners off the Libyan coast without a fight, it was disclosed today. The schooners carrying light guns were identified as the Maria Giovanna and the Tiberio. Both were used in carrying war supplies between Bardia and Tobruk. 30 crewmen were taken prisoners. London, January 22nd. Britain must conscript its manpower and womenpower within the next 6 months because it faces the intense demands of an army of about 4 million armed men, equipped on a scale of that required in continuous action on the continent of Europe against the German army, Prime Minister Winston Churchill told the House of Commons today. Churchill's remarks were interpreted in some quarters as an indication that a British plan for an invasion of the European continent was the impelling reason for the government's preparations to conscript labor, announced by Labour Minister Ernest Bevin yesterday. Other dispatches from London yesterday gave the same interpretation of Churchill's remarks, seeing in them the same possibility that Britain is preparing her own blitzkrieg. Even as he said Britain finally has got into its war stride, the Prime Minister rejected the demands of those who have been advocating a small superwar cabinet and especially the suggestion that a home front dictator be appointed. We don't live in a dictator country where the people can be brutally overruled, he said. We do not want to live in a dictator country. We want to live in a country where His Majesty's cabinet governs subject to continual superintendence. Britain has a very large and formidable force, both for fighting overseas and for defense, Churchill asserted, revealing that the plan for the army, which he put at 4 million men, counting the Home Guard, with the exception of equipment for 10 more divisions, was unaltered from the early days of the war. London, January 22nd. German bombers made relatively minor stabs at the southeast coast and over Yorkshire today, and 2 were reported shot down in aerial combat. Nowhere in Britain were raid casualties reported during the day. Bombs fell in at least 2 locations, but the effect was called negligible. In East Coast Canadian port, January 22nd. A Nazi ace rated as one of the 3 most deadly in the German Air Force arrived in Canada today with hundreds of other prisoners, most of them airmen shot down over England. The 25-year-old ace is credited in Berlin with having shot down 56 planes since the start of the Spanish Civil War, in which he flew for the Franco forces. After fighting over France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Britain, he was downed by a Briton over the English Channel. His name was not disclosed. The prisoners arrived on a camouflaged ship and walked ashore between lines of Imperial and Canadian soldiers. The Canadian description of the captive German ace fits that of Major Helmuth Wick, commander of the famous Richthofen Squadron, who was believed in Berlin to have been killed over the English Channel. Fellow pilots saw him bail out and descend to the water off the Isle of Wight. London, January 22nd. The Admiralty announced tonight the 1,340-ton British destroyer Hyperion has been lost. It was the 37th British destroyer officially acknowledged as lost since the war began. The announcement said the Hyperion was damaged by a mine or torpedo which rendered it incapable of steaming and that it was necessary for other British ships to sink it. The locale and date were withheld. The Hyperion was built under the program of 1934 and carried a normal complement of 145 men. The 9,100-ton cruiser Southampton, damaged in the Sicilian Channel on January 10th by Nazi dive bombers, also had to be sunk by sister ships. The Hyperion was the vessel that cornered the German liner Columbus on December 19, 1939, off the Virginia coast, causing the Nazi crew to scuttle the 32,581-ton vessel. The Columbus had left Veracruz, Mexico, in an attempt to reach Germany through the British blockade. Kunming, China, January 22nd. 6 Japanese dive bombers, followed by 9 in formation, raided the Kunming area this afternoon, but the damage was limited to 2 villages southeast of the city, which were set afire. Casualties were estimated at 30. London, January 22nd. Harry L. Hopkins, President Roosevelt's personal envoy, saw both houses of the British Parliament in session today. He heard Prime Minister Winston Churchill speak in the House of Commons. Berlin, January 22nd. The German High Command's economics expert told foreign correspondents today that the German taxpayer had paid for about half the cost of German rearmament and the cost of the war to date. In Germany, future generations will not be saddled with the terrific war costs because of the manner of German financing, he said, adding that inflation probably would be a post-war development, but not on our side. The rearmament cost was estimated at about $36 billion. Cost of the war to date has not been disclosed because it is a military secret, but since the war started, the German national debt has increased about $14 billion. About half the rearmament cost and increase in debt already had been paid by the taxpayer, the expert said, and on comparatively long-term loans covering the rest, the interest dropped from 4.5 to 3.5% since hostilities started. The tax revenue for next year was estimated at about $10.8 billion. A war economics commentator said any people could pay for wars by only 2 feasible methods: passing the bill on to future generations or through sacrifice by the wartime civilian population. The German population, it was added, is long on sacrifice. He said that saving food under the rationing system amounted to almost $2 billion annually, and that doing without new clothing, machines, etc. amounts for another $3.6 billion savings. Curtailment of capital investments and holding repairs and replacements to a minimum amount for another $2.4 billion. Thus, there is a total of about $8 billion, which German economy frees for the war effort without passing anything on to future taxpayers, the expert asserted. He denied that the increase in German money circulation was a forerunner of inflation. Montevideo, Uruguay, January 22nd. The trial court refused today for the 3rd time to release on bail 8 Nazi leaders under arrest since September. They are accused of conspiracy and a military plot to seize Uruguay as an agricultural colony for Germany. Discovery of the plot in June caused the United States to send 2 cruisers to Montevideo. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Justice Department officials said today that steps will be taken to deport Mrs. Raisa Berkman Browder, a native of Russia and wife of Earl Browder, Communist Party leader in this country. It was announced on October 31st that she was subject to deportation. She had no appeal. London, January 22nd. An auction sale of Neville Chamberlain's possessions today attracted many more dealers than souvenir hunters. Many belongings, including his fishing gear and collection of butterflies, were distributed beforehand to friends and favorite institutions. Ottawa, Ontario, January 22nd. Canada's aircraft production is a mess, the Ottawa Journal charged today, adding its voice to a rising wave of criticism from the press. Instead of the 360 planes a month promised as the probable output early in 1941, the Journal said, we turned out probably not more than 150 planes in January. The Malton, Ontario plant, the Journal said, produces no more than 40% of its capacity, although the Commonwealth Air Training Plan desperately needs advanced trainer planes. The Toronto Globe and Mail yesterday said Federal Aircraft Limited, which controls public aircraft contracts, was an obstacle to production and should be removed. Paris, January 18th, via Berlin, delayed. Attempting to curb a whispering campaign said to have been going on in Paris, police reported today they had arrested 50 persons in wine shops and other places and charged them with having spread alarming reports. Stockholm, Sweden, January 22nd. To cope with a growing wave of sabotage and anti-Quisling agitation reported in Norway, the governor of Oslo has decreed the creation of a new state police. This unit will be commanded by Colonel Sundio, who was dismissed by the pre-invasion Norwegian government as a traitor. He had surrendered Narvik to the Germans without a fight. The Swedish press report stated Sundio's first task will be to intensify a purge of the police force, most of which has been dismissed for leniency to demonstrators. His second urgent task will be the pacification of West Norway. Swedish newspaper reports today stated the greater part of West Norway is out of control of either the German military or Norwegian authorities. New York, January 22nd. A record-breaking Bermuda to Lisbon flight was completed by the Atlantic Clipper today in 16 hours and 46 minutes, Pan American Airways reported. Captain Robert O.D. Sullivan was in command. The previous nonstop Bermuda-Lisbon record was 18 hours, 24 minutes, also set by Sullivan. And now for national news. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. 2 men at opposite poles of political belief joined today in telling Congress that President Roosevelt's war dictatorship measure would destroy our form of government and unquestionably involve us in the European war. The 2 witnesses before the House Foreign Affairs Committee considering Bill 1776 for the abdication of congressional war-making and spending powers to Mr. Roosevelt were Hanford McNider, former Assistant Secretary of War and Minister to Canada under Republican administrations, a past commander of the American Legion. Norman Thomas, 4 times the Socialist Party's candidate for president. 2 individuals more widely differing in their domestic political views could hardly have been chosen, but they were drawn together in a common alarm over the possibilities of the Roosevelt bill, which they expressed in the strongest of language. The bill, in my opinion, would be a direct scuttling of our form of government, a betrayal of the American people, declared McNider. It is a bill to authorize undeclared war in the name of peace and dictatorship in the name of defending democracy, said Thomas. McNider served with distinction in the Army in the World War. At the outbreak of the war, he entered an officer's training camp and was commissioned a second lieutenant in August 1917. The next month, he went to France with the 2nd Division's 9th Infantry. During overseas service, he was promoted through successive ranks until he became a lieutenant colonel of infantry. He He took part in the Esne, Marne, St. Mihiel, and Argonne engagements and was wounded at St. Mihiel. He received numerous citations and decorations, including the Legion of Honor, Croix de Guerre, and Distinguished Service Cross. Committee officials were busy making preparations tonight for the appearance tomorrow of Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh, who will climax the mass of testimony arrayed against the bill. Lindbergh is expected to puncture the propaganda being circulated by interventionists, which contend that invasion of the United States by Germany could easily be accomplished if Great Britain should lose the war. It was learned today that a favorable report on the president's bill by the House committee is assured. Only one of the 15 Democratic members, James A. Shanley of Connecticut, will vote against the measure, while 2 of the 10 Republican members, Charles A. Eaton of New Jersey and Foster Stearns of New Hampshire, are for it. The probable committee vote, therefore, in favor of the bill will be 16-9. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee decided to open public hearings next Monday. It may summon some of the same witnesses who appeared before the House committee. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Senator Charles L. McNary, minority leader and the 1940 Republican nominee for vice president, today said he is opposed to President Roosevelt's Lend-Lease bill to aid Britain in its present form. He indicated he would support the bill if it modified to limit the president's powers. I am opposed to the Lend-Lease bill in its present form because it grants extraordinary and total power to one person, said the Oregon senator. This is not the Democratic way of life, and I earnestly hope that the bill may be modified by appropriate committees or after debate in Congress. During the fall months, the president was advocating aid to Great Britain short of war. That policy became a national anthem. There was unity of thought. I favored that plan and shall support earnestly an all-out policy of aid to the democracies by every method short of war. My great concern is to keep our country out of the conflict of mass murder in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Senator McNary told reporters that the bill should be amended to limit duration of the powers to be granted to the president, to limit the billions of dollars to be placed at his disposal, and to prevent him from using American warships to convoy munitions to Europe. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. A book bearing the names of 11,000 members of the Roll Call of American Women who opposed the War Dictatorship Bill, H.R. 1776, and American entry into the European War was presented today to Congressman at Large William G. Stratton of Illinois, youngest member of the House of Representatives, and to Scott W. Lucas, Democratic Senator from Illinois. Ms. Jessamine Hoagland, Executive Vice President of the Roll Call of American Women, came to Washington from the organization's national headquarters in Chicago to make the presentation in the office of Congressman Stratton. Among those present was Mrs. Ruth Hannah Sims. The roll call was organized 6 months ago to express the opposition of women to entry into the war. Last month, this group merged its membership with the America First Committee. Its officers are Mrs. Harriet E. Vidum, President, Ms. Hoagland, Executive Vice President, Mrs. Margaret Ayer Barnes, Secretary-Treasurer, all of Chicago. A $10,715,019 aircraft engine order given the Continental Motors Corporation Detroit, an $8,775,000 truck order given the Fargo Motor Corporation, Chrysler Division, Detroit, and Naval plans to spend $23,500,000 to expand California shipbuilding activities, highlighted the nation's defense activities yesterday. A Chicago architectural firm, Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White, was named as architect and engineer for a new $4,763,750 Army Air Base in Puerto Rico. Details were withheld with respect to the Continental Motors contract, which covers parts as well as aircraft engines. In addition to its truck order, Fargo Motor received an Army contract for $1,272,240 of ambulances. Another large Army order was one of $2,550,000 yards of wind-resistant cotton cloth for $1,281,375 given to J.P. Stevens and Company, Incorporated, New York. The Navy's plans to expand shipbuilding activities in California are contingent on new appropriations by Congress. The War Department announced a $6,917 contract to the Coleman Lamp and Stove Company, Chicago, for 2,329 gasoline lanterns. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. The Treasury will sell tomorrow $600 million of national defense notes bearing 0.75% interest in maturing in 3 to 4 years. The Treasury last month sold $530 million of similar notes maturing in 5 years. After that sale, Secretary Henry Morgenthau remarked that the next issue might cost the Treasury a little more because of an anti-inflation plan of the Federal Reserve System had depressed the market. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, January 22nd. Work on $26 million worth of Army and Navy defense orders ceased at the Allis-Chalmers Manufacturing Company today as members of the CIO United Automobiles Workers Union went on strike. All shop departments closed, affecting about 8,000 workers. Another 2,000 employees, including the office staff, draftsmen, and supervisors, did not join the walkout. Max W. Babb, company president, said the union demand for a closed shop was the main point of issue, adding that the company was willing to negotiate on wages and other matters. The company produces turbines for warships, generators, shafts, pumps, and gun mounts. It is the largest plant in Wisconsin. Among his return from Washington this afternoon, Governor Julius P. Heil said he would make a personal inquiry into the controversy. The strikers did not establish picket lines. Harold Christoffel, president of the local union, said moving pictures would be taken of persons entering the factory and that strikebreakers would be dealt with when an agreement with the company is reached. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Intermitting alarm over the bogging down of aircraft production, the Air Corps has begun its own survey of the airplane industry throughout the country, it was learned today. Besides future prospects, Air Corps officials are said to be eager to determine the present status of all phases of aerial manufacture, planes, engines, and accessories. They hope to get a line on probable delivery dates for the 19,000 planes now on order. Sources in the War Department admitted that the survey was ordered after air officials became convinced of the falsity of early estimates that the goal of 25,000 planes would be reached by July 1st, 1942. At best, officials now believe the production rate by the middle of 1942 will not exceed 4,500 planes per month. Although the greatest airplane building program in the nation's history was started 7 months ago, figures show that the Army received fewer than 40 combat planes in the last 3 months and only 300 in all of 1940. The Air Corps now has only a dozen first-line armored fighting planes equipped with modern firepower and self-sealing gasoline tanks. More than 90% of the fighting planes produced in the United States are being sent to Great Britain. This is made possible under a rule of thumb established last November by President Roosevelt to govern the division of military aircraft between this country and England. As its share of the division, this country is receiving the bulk of training and auxiliary craft being produced. The Army got 1,000 training ships last year, records show. In addition to the 19,000 aircraft on order for the United States, manufacturers hold contracts for 14,000 planes for the British. William F. Knutson, Director General of the Office of Production Management, declared at a press conference today that he has not given up hope that these 33,000 planes will be ready for delivery by July 1942. Admitting that the program got off to a slow start, he expressed the hope that the output will be speeded up when automobile firms begin producing plane parts later this year. Knutson said he expects production in the aircraft assembly plants, which will be supplied parts by motor car makers, will start sometime in the last quarter of this year. He expects the Kansas City plant will be the first in operation, but offered no date. The plants at Omaha, Nebraska, Fort Worth, Texas, and Tulsa, Oklahoma will begin production in that order, he estimated. Hamilton, Bermuda, January 22nd. The House of Assembly was informed in a message from the governor today that an agreement has been reached by which Morgan's Island and Truckers Island in Great Sound have been leased to the United States for 99 years for construction of a defense base. The islands together cover about 30 acres. Morgan's Island, a favorite picnic ground for Bermudians, is owned by Mrs. Philip Crockett of New Brunswick, New Jersey. Tucker's Island is owned by Mrs. Woolley Hart of London. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Legislation providing for the expenditure of an additional $1,259 million for construction of naval and merchant vessels and authorizing an expansion of the Naval Academy costing $1.25 million a year was advanced in the House today. The House passed a supplementary $909 million Navy construction bill authorizing the Navy Department to, number one, build 400 auxiliary ships at a cost of $400 million. Number two, spend $315 million to provide shipyard facilities for construction of these and other vessels for the two-ocean Navy. Number three, spend $194 million for more gun and armor factories to keep the supply of this equipment abreast of the shipbuilding speed up. The bill was passed by a vote of 382 to 2, the negative votes being cast by Representatives William P. Lambertson, Republican, Kansas, and Vito Marciano, American Labor Party, New York. The auxiliary ships comprise 66 submarine chasers, 24 motor torpedo boats, 190 minesweepers, and 120 miscellaneous craft not specifically determined, including additional submarine chasers, fleet tugs, and salvage vessels. The House also passed a bill authorizing each senator and representative to appoint one additional cadet to the Naval Academy. This would increase the number of each member's annual appointees from 4 to 5. The bill also would raise from 50 to 100 the number of naval reservists taken each year at Annapolis, from 15 to 25 the number of midshipmen the president may appoint to the Academy. This expansion, the Naval Affairs Committee stated, is essential to the provision of the expanded Navy with a sufficient number of officers. The Appropriations Committee favorably reported to the House the appropriation requested by the President of $350 million for the construction of 200 merchant marine ships. This bill is scheduled for passage by the House next Friday. The 200 merchantmen will average a unit cost of $1,550,000, a total of $310 million. For the construction of shipbuilding facilities, $36 million are allotted. Administrative expense is estimated at $3.5 million and contingencies at $500,000. Rear Admiral Emery S. Lamb, chairman of the Maritime Commission, told the committee that the primary reason for this emergency merchant shipbuilding program is the depletion of foreign merchant tonnage by destruction in the war. Of the tonnage destroyed, about half was British. The 200 new American ships will make it possible to transfer more American merchant tonnage to Britain if necessary. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Bananas, 7,000 pounds of them, well ripened, will help launch a 413-foot cargo ship at Beaumont, Texas, Saturday. For the benefit of those who might not know it already, the Maritime Commission explained today that the objective of a launching is for a vessel to slide promptly from dry land into deep water. And for this purpose, bananas have been found an efficient substitute for launching grease. Bananas have provided the slide for small craft at Beaumont, but they have never been used for the launching of a ship approaching the size of the 7,400-ton Cape Lookout, which will go down the ways Saturday. The granddaughter of Jesse H. Jones, Secretary of Commerce, Miss Audrey Jesse Jones, will christen the vessel. It is the first ocean-going cargo ship to be built in Texas since the World War. Worcester, Massachusetts, January 22nd. A new submachine gun weighing only 6 1/2 pounds and firing 500 rounds a minute is in production in the Harrington and Richardson Arms Company factory here. The Tommy gun, a similar weapon much used by police departments and adopted by the Army, weighs 10 pounds. The company says it has no United States government orders, but the weapon has been tested at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds and declared highly satisfactory by the United States Army Ordnance officers. The gun is especially adapted for parachute troops and similar light, fast-moving bodies. The British government has ordered that the factory describes merely as a quantity. The company will be tooled within 2 weeks to produce 500 daily and by April 1st to produce 1,000 daily. Models for the British include a compensator which hides the muzzle flash from any angle after the first shot. President Joseph P. Carney said that whereas the present military-type submachine gun sells for around $150 in quantity lots, this new lighter weapon can be sold for about $50. Present models are chambered for 45 caliber ammunition, but plans have been made to bore for new 30 caliber United States government ammunition of greater range and higher velocity than 45. The gun was designed by Eugene G. Reising with a lengthy string of gun patents behind him and other of the arms company experts. It has 3 moving parts: bolt, hammer, and recoil spring. So simple is the construction that Reising has, while blindfolded, stripped and reassembled the weapon in 83 seconds. The magazine, which also serves as a left-hand grip, is made to hold either 20 or 50 cartridges. While the fire rate is 500 a minute, it does not actually fire that many since a few seconds are required to extract a clip and insert another. The clip is inserted much as in small sporting rifles. A lever provides semi-automatic or full automatic firing. In the first, each finger pull fires a shot. In the second, the gun continues firing while the trigger is held until the clip is exhausted. On the barrel, heat dissipator rings and a compensator to combat the muzzle rise after each recoil, although the recoil spring takes up the major jump. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Henry Kaiser, president of the Permenti Corporation, Oakland, California, announced today the company would begin construction of a $12 million magnesium reduction plant at Palo Alto upon successful conclusion of conferences now underway with the Defense Commission. He said plans indicated a probable production capacity of 12,000 tons annually. 1/3 lighter and fully as strong as aluminum, magnesium is used in the manufacture of airplanes. The Defense Commission yesterday issued a certificate to the Permenti Corporation, which would permit it to deduct $6,500,000 of the cost of the plant from its taxable income over a 5-year period. Raw materials for the Palo Alto plant, Kaiser said, might be brought in from several available sources, including Nevada. Aboard the transatlantic Yankee Clipper, January 22nd. This Pan-American clipper carrying Wendell L. Willkie to Europe arrived at Bermuda today after a 5-hour flight from New York. Willkie appeared eager to reach England and chatted with others on the plane, asking their opinion on the chances of a Nazi invasion of England. He carried a letter of introduction from President Roosevelt to Prime Minister Winston Churchill and has been invited by Churchill to call on him as soon as he reaches England, probably on Friday. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Associate Justice James Clark McReynolds, brusque and immovable foe of the New Deal, announced his retirement from the Supreme Court today, making possible President Roosevelt's 6th appointment to that 9-man tribunal. His withdrawal started an immediate flurry of speculation as to who his successor would be. Attorney General Robert H. Jackson was considered as of the moment at least the most probable choice, but the names of Francis Biddle, the Solicitor General James F. Burns, Democrat South Carolina, and others also were prominent in the discussion. Washington, D.C., January 22nd. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau Jr. asked Congress today to authorize the establishment of a new coinage mint at such location in the central section of the country as would best serve the public interest. He wrote Speaker Sam Rayburn that the demands for subsidiary silver, nickel, and bronze coins have materially increased in the last few years, due largely to the extended application of sales, amusement, and similar taxes, both federal and state. The three existing mints, Morgenthau asserted, had been working on 24-hour shifts since last July. They are located at San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Denver. A bill embodying Morgenthau's recommendations was introduced by Representative William H. Larrabee, a Democrat, Indiana. Frankfort, Kentucky, January 22nd. Clemency for the last of 7 coal miners convicted of murder after the bloody 1931 Battle of Evarts during Harlan County labor strife was granted today by Acting Governor Rhodes K. Myers. Myers granted a full pardon to Al Benson, 45, one of the miners, and pardoned Lee Fleenor, 37, former Harlan County Deputy Sheriff and Mine Guard, on condition he leave Kentucky and never return. The life sentences of the other 3 miners, Chester Poor, 36, W.B. Jones, 58, and Jim Reynolds, 50, were commuted to 21 years, making them eligible for parole when the State Parole Board meets next week. The pardon orders were sent to the State Reformatory at LaGrange, and Benson and Fleenor were released immediately. Requests for release of the 4 miners have been made annually. 3 other miners convicted in the pitched gun battle at Evarts, Kentucky, in which 4 men were killed, were given their freedom in 1935 by former Governor Ruby LaFoon. Nashville, Tennessee, January 22nd. Measures approved by a committee of the Tennessee legislature imposing a 3% gross receipts tax on newspapers, other periodicals, and radio stations were returned to the committee today for further consideration. The Senate Education Committee, considering bills to provide additional funds for schools, gave its approval to the proposal yesterday. Senator Damon Hayden, who obtained return of the bills to the committee, said there is some question as to their constitutionality. And now for local and regional news. More than 400,000 protests against President Roosevelt's dictator bill have been amassed thus far by the America First Committee and the Citizens Keep America Out of War Committee, and names are still pouring in to their Chicago headquarters, it was reported yesterday. Mrs. Janet Ayer Fairbank, vice chairman of the Chicago chapter of the America First Committee, said that from a total of more than 200,000 names received by her group, volunteers are forwarding 10,000 daily to congressmen in Washington, D.C. to let them know of the widespread public reaction against the president's bill. Putting the brakes on this movement to drag us into war is a gigantic task, she said. Because of the clerical work involved in receiving telephone protests, she urged again that objectors write to the committee at 122 South Michigan Avenue. Earl Southard, secretary of the Citizens Keep America Out of War Committee, said petition forms are flowing into his committee, each signed by 50 citizens, almost as fast as fresh forms can be sent out over the nation. A father who joined the Citizens Committee yesterday cited 6 reasons for his action. He is Oscar Hanson, 1952 Race Avenue. His reasons are his 6 sons, all of draft age. Maurice, 34 years old, Olaf, 33, Henry, 28, Woodrow and David, twins, 27, and Lester, 21. National headquarters of the America First Committee mailed 10,000 posters to 545 chapters throughout the country. The posters are captioned, "War's First Casualty," and show a shell smashing through the uplifted arm of the Statue of Liberty. First sketched several weeks ago, the posters turned out to be even more timely than expected because of the appearance of H.R. 1776, the War Dictatorship Bill, said the artist Willard Elms. Distribution of 100,000 handbills warning the people to fight against American dictatorship was assisted yesterday by 20 Northwestern University co-eds at elevated line stations at Howard Street and in Evanston. Brigadier General Thomas S. Hammond, chairman of the Chicago America First chapter, issued a statement to clarify the committee's stand to aid Great Britain. Excerpts follow. The America First Committee does not oppose aid to England. On the contrary, it is wholeheartedly in favor of such aid. The only limitations we would place on aid to England are, number 1, such aid should not interfere with our own rearmament program, which is intended to make us so strong that no nation or group of nations will dare attack us. Number 2, such aid must not get us into war. Number 3, such aid should be the expense of the British taxpayers and not the expense of the American taxpayers. Bureaucratic jealousies and misunderstanding by Army officials are about to kill the greatest source of young pilots in the United States at a time when the country has its greatest need for experienced flyers. Fowler W. Barker, Secretary of the Air Transport Association, warned yesterday. He spoke at a meeting of airline traffic officials in the Congress Hotel. According to information reaching the aviation industry, Barker said the civilian pilot training program, which has created 36,500 flyers in the last 18 months, is to be dropped within the next fiscal year. The reason for this, he said, is the mistaken belief in Washington that the program has been a failure in creating a pool of partly trained airmen who could be taken into Army and Navy schools for polishing as military flyers. Actually, Washington has been badly misinformed on this point, Barker said. The program has been a tremendous success. Although its results have hardly begun to be felt, nearly 10% of all the young college men who finished their CPTP are now in the military air services or in the air service schools as cadets. The program opened in November 1939 when 10,000 students in 300 colleges throughout the nation enrolled for instruction in a special flying course prepared by the Civil Aeronautics Authority. Approximately 8,900 earned pilot licenses. The following October, 15,000 students from 350 colleges were enrolled, earning 13,800 licenses, and still another group of 13,900 will receive their licenses within the next 3 weeks, Barker explained. Never before has aviation taken the forward steps in this country that it has while the CPTP was operating. Barker continued, "We have shown the nation's colleges a new field and a great many schools, the University of Chicago, for example, are going to continue their flying courses regardless of what the government does about the CPTP. The Army says that the CPTP graduates are not trained in the manner that makes them readily adaptable to continuation of their training in Army advanced schools. This can be easily rectified. Let the Army tell the CPTP operators and instructors just how they want the boys trained, and the operators will do it." Strangely enough, the Navy has announced itself well satisfied with its CPTP students. The Navy schools say they will take all the advanced CPTP students it can get, and thousands of them are pouring into the Navy schools. Few statistics are available to show just how well the CPTP is functioning, but Les Bauman of Fort Worth, Texas, has kept track of 33 of his CPTP students who entered Randolph Field. Of that group, 28 went on to the basic course, and most of them already are graduates as second lieutenants in the Air Corps Reserve. In the same class with this 33 were 87 boys who did not have CPTP training, and only 31 of this group went on to the Army's basic stage. Police Commissioner Altman forwarded to all Chicago police captains yesterday a request from Paul G. Armstrong, Illinois Director of Selective Service, that the state draft headquarters be notified of the arrest or sentencing of any men of draft age. Armstrong said the purpose is to keep the draft board informed so that draftees will not be classed as draft delinquents in the event that they are jailed. Police also were instructed to notify draft officials if any man arrested is found to have no registration certificate. Plans to organize the Illinois Reserve Militia as a motorized force equipped with 1,000 privately owned passenger cars and trucks will be discussed at an all-day conference of military leaders in the LaSalle Hotel Saturday, Major General John V. Clinnan, commander of the organization, announced yesterday. Alderman J.M. Arvey, 24th Ward, chairman of the City Council's Finance Committee, announced yesterday that he will submit his resignation to the council on Monday. He said he has successfully passed the Army's physical examination and will be inducted into service early next month as Judge Advocate of the 33rd Division, Illinois National Guard, with the rank of Major. Alderman Arvey will also resign as 24th Ward Democratic Committeeman, a post he has held since 1934. He has been an alderman for 18 years and chairman of the Finance Committee for 6 years. The council's Rules Committee probably will meet next week to select his successor in the latter position. His aldermanic office may be filled at a special election later this year. Springfield, Illinois, January 22nd. Governor Dwight H. Green, after a careful look at the state's financial position tonight, charged his short-term Democratic predecessor, John Stell, with responsibility for the fact that the Illinois General Revenue Working Cash Fund is at the almost unprecedented low of $1,118,412.64. Green quickly squelched the scarehead publicity purporting to show the state in dire financial straits and said payrolls will be met and bills paid promptly, despite an inquiry into recent expenditures. The governor declared that the near record low in the working cash fund has been caused by the unusual rate at which recent expenditures have been made. Springfield, Illinois, January 22nd. Governor Dwight H. Green today named a Democrat as one of his close advisors by appointing Alexander Wilson of Cairo to be Assistant Director of Finance. Wilson, as Henry Horner's executive assistant, was for 8 years the late Democratic governor's contact man with the legislature on administration bills. It is considered probable that he will continue in the same capacity under Governor Green. Pontiac, Illinois, January 22nd. A young draft evader and his father were near death from bullet wounds tonight after a gun and knife battle with 2 law enforcement officers. The officers were stabbed in the throat and head but were not in serious condition. The fight took place in the farm home of the evader, Ernest Raymond Easel, 22 years old, at Rooks Creek, 6 miles west of here. Young Easel was said to have sent a threatening letter to the Livingston County Draft Board, daring officers to come and get him. He had been notified by the board last November 22nd that he was delinquent in failing to register for military service. Deputy United States Marshal Eugene Ahrens came here from Peoria today with a warrant for Easel's arrest and, accompanied by Chief Deputy Sheriff Robert Jones, went to Easel's home. They said they conferred with the draft evader and his father, Martin Easel, and believed they had induced the youth to accompany them peaceably. But the young man and his father suddenly set upon the officers. While young Easel carried Jones to the floor in a struggle, his father slashed at the marshal. Then he cut Jones on the throat as the deputy sheriff struggled on the floor. The officers finally pulled free and fired. The son shot in the stomach and the leg was taken out to the officer's car. As they prepared to leave, the elder Easel fired a shotgun at them. Jones said he fired back and saw the farmer's arms drop. An ambulance was sent back for the elder Easel, who was shot 3 times. Belleville, Illinois, January 22nd. Meeting in chambers with Attorney General George F. Barrett, Circuit Judge Maurice V. Joyce today authorized a new device against Cook County bookmakers. Judge Joyce's statewide anti-gambling injunction issued last December 3rd named 1,380 persons in Cook County, but only 41 were served with summonses and writs by the sheriff, who reported the remainder not found. On Barrett's petition, the judge ordered the issuance of alias summonses against 1,339 of the Cook County defendants and directed appointment of special officers to effect service. Mrs. Charlotte Jocelyn denied last night that she was ever guilty of misconduct with attorney Thomas Hart Fisher, her representative in her recent divorce action against George R. Jocelyn, son of a wealthy electrical supplies manufacturer. She declared emphatically that Fisher was never inside the bedroom of her Lake Bluff home and branded statements by 2 former servants to that effect as complete and absolute lies. Mrs. Jocelyn's assertion climaxed the evening portion of an all-day session in the offices of Master of Chancery John J. Kelly, before whom Jocelyn is contesting Fisher's petition for $24,132 in fees on the ground that Fisher and Ms. Jocelyn exceeded the customary lawyer-client relationship. Other developments during the turbulent hearing were, number 1, Jocelyn was described by Fisher as an incurable juvenile and an escapist. Number 2, attorney Alvin C. Hubbard, Jocelyn's lawyer, was charged with accusing one of the opposition's witnesses of trying to blackmail Jocelyn. Number 3, Mrs. Jocelyn testified that her former husband told her he had brought the charge of misconduct against Fisher regardless of its truth and solely to smear Mr. Fisher. Mrs. Jocelyn's testimony regarding her relations with Fisher developed when attorney Harold Keel, representing Fisher, asked, "How many times did Mr. Fisher ever visit you in Lake Bluff?" "Only on one occasion," she replied. "It was in a winter month in February 1938. I wore a beige gown with elbow-length sleeve and a V-neck. He saw my 4 children in the upstairs nursery, then we had dinner and talked." Question: Was he ever in your bedroom? Answer: never. Question: Did you ever commit an act of infidelity with Mr. Fisher? Answer: never. Discussing the statements of the servants, Edward and Catherine Richards, that Fisher had visited the home 6 times and allegedly had been in Mrs. Jocelyn's bedroom, she said, "I never in my life heard such lies. I never thought Mr. Fisher in anything but a professional way. Our relations were entirely impersonal." Earlier, Fisher, under questioning by Kelly regarding a confessional conference with Jocelyn, said, "I always regarded him as an incurable juvenile and an escapist who wanted to drag his wife through life by the hair." He also said Jocelyn told him that he had hired psychiatrists who, he said, would tell Mrs. Jocelyn to live as he lived and get satisfaction elsewhere. Keel's charge against Hubbard came when Theodore Holm, whose wife, Jean, is Jocelyn's cousin, told of knowing that Jocelyn supposedly had a mistress. When Hubbard asked, "Didn't you ask Jocelyn to loan you money or else you'd tell about this supposed affair?" Keel shouted, "You're trying to make this man out a blackmailer." He received permission to call Jocelyn to the stand. Jocelyn then testified that Holm had made no such threat. At the end of the hearing, it was decided that Master Kelly and the attorneys will go to Clearwater, Florida on February 3rd to take the testimony of Dulcie Meyer, formerly a nurse in the Lake Bluff home, and to Los Angeles, California for a statement from M.L. Jocelyn, George Jocelyn's father. Sandwich, Illinois, January 22nd. A quarrel over food served a border resulted today in the death of the complainer, Carl Holmberg, 35 years old, and grand jury action against Clarence Smith, 73. Holmberg, a factory worker, died this morning at the Sandwich Hospital. He was shot last night in an altercation which also involved Holmberg's wife, Mildred, 29, and Smith's sister, Mrs. Clara Humiston. For several months, Holmberg and his wife had been rooming and boarding at the home in which Smith, a bachelor, lived with his sister. Chief of Police Carl Walters gave the following account of the shooting. Holmberg arrived home in an intoxicated condition and began complaining about the food served him and his wife. When Mrs. Holmberg remonstrated with him, he struck her, knocking her down. Smith and Mrs. Humiston sought to quiet him, but in the quarrel with them, he struck Mrs. Humiston. Enraged at this, Smith obtained his revolver from a dresser drawer and shot Holmberg twice in the chest. The Downers Grove Village Board will renew its plea to the Illinois Commerce Commission to provide full protection at railroad crossings in the village as a result of the death Tuesday of Cecilia Larson, 11 years old, who was thrown 98 feet when a Burlington Zephyr traveling an estimated 90 miles an hour struck her at Forest Avenue. The Forest Avenue crossing gates do not cover the sidewalk. C.B. Stair, Village Board President, said nothing has been done to protect the Maple Avenue crossing further despite the Commerce Commission's order to the railroad to do something about it. Cecilia's sister, Marianne 9, was with her when the accident happened. Marianne jerked her hand from Cecilia's and leaped back, but Cecilia ran forward and was struck. The girl's home is at 4915 Saratoga Avenue in the suburb. The coldest weather of the winter is on its way to Chicago from northwestern Canada, according to forecaster R.E. Gumpf. He said the temperature would be below freezing today with light to moderate snow and that sub-zero temperatures would arrive tomorrow. The weatherman said the indications are that there will be severe winter weather for a week or more. The coldest day of the winter thus far was December 3rd when the mercury fell to 5 below zero. If you had to turn on your lights at 10 a.m. yesterday, here's why. Cold air from the north bumped into warm air from the south directly over the city. The collision resulted in low, thick clouds which held the smoke down while the wind shifted from the south to the north. The north wind had the north wind then huffed and puffed and blew the smoke away along with some of the clouds. Dr. Herman N. Bunsen, health commissioner, reported yesterday that up to Tuesday night, 80 cases of influenza had been reported this year, compared with 47 for the corresponding period in 1940. There have been 7 deaths this year, the same number as in 1940. Thus far, there have been 694 pneumonia cases, compared with 620 last year, and 93 deaths from pneumonia, with 126 a year ago. Police testified yesterday in safety court that a car driven by Walter Olszewski when he was in an accident January 14th at 47th and Aberdeen Streets was 10 years old and in poor condition. Judge Leon Elderman sentenced Olszewski to 21 years old of 5360 South Peoria Street to 5 days in the county jail for reckless driving and suspended his license for 1 year. Then he suggested that Olszewski would be wise to get rid of the car. Olszewski replied, "I sold it at the scene of the accident for $2. Morrison, Illinois, January 22nd. An exciting barehanded capture of a big 8-point buck deer was related today by 3 Morrison youths who wrestled it into submission and brought it home alive. The gunless hunters were Charles Mush, 15 years old, John Gertie, 17, and Harold Piper, 21. They nursed bruises and sprains received in the encounter, which lasted more than an hour. The 300-pound deer is now on exhibition behind an 8-foot fence. We picked up the deer's trail and followed it for about 15 miles, said Mush. It was plenty smart, doubling back and around us and running in its own tracks. Piper finally found the buck caught by its big antlers in a woven wire fence. He tried to hold it, wrestling with it until his companions arrived. We released its prongs, Mush said, and tried to hobble it with our belts, but it broke them as fast as we put them on. We hung on to its antlers to keep from getting hurt, but its pawing feet were more dangerous. I got a car and we put it in the back seat untied. Boy, oh boy. Piper and Gertie's held it down while I drove the Pipers home. Piper sprained both wrists and we had a few bruises and were tired the next day as we could hardly walk, but it was lots of fun. And in sports, the Blackhawks tonight will seek to take good care of a situation that has become most embarrassing. They will seek to defeat the New York Americans in Chicago Stadium. Everybody beats the Americans except the Hawks, and manager Paul Thompson's lads have come to the conclusions it's high time something is done about the situation. The Americans now are in the National Hockey League cellar, a thoroughly familiar habitat, for that's where they were last season. Despite this lowly rating, however, the Hawks have defeated the Tailenders only once in the last 9 games they have played them, this season and last. It will be the 3rd meeting of the teams in this campaign. Red Dutson's fellows beat the Hawks 1-0 in the Chicago season opener, and 2 games in New York have been 2-2 ties. Inability to whip the Americans consistently is slowly making manager Thompson punchier and punchier, especially when he gets tangled in comparative results. For instance, in their last 9 games with the world champion New York Rangers and the league champion Boston Bruins, the Hawks have lost only once. Such business as this doesn't make sense, of course. The Americans naturally are eager to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, but won't unless they can get out of 7th place. Right now, they are 2 games behind the 6th place Montreal Canadiens, another lowly team that keeps breathing because it can beat the Hawks. It is expected the American forwards will be feeding the puck to Reginald Hooley Smith a little more than usual tonight. Hooley will be trying for his 200th big league goal. If he succeeds, he will be the 7th player in the famed circle who has attained 200 major league goals. Dick Clapper of Boston netted his number 200 last Saturday to beat Toronto 1-0. Others in this corridor of the Hall of Fame are Nels Stewart, Aurel Joliot, Charlie Conacher, Bill Cook, and Harvey Jackson. Smith, playing his 17th season in the National Hockey League, is the record holder for longevity, passing the mark of Joliot, who served the Canadiens for 16 years. Max Bentley, recently a Hawk rookie forward who had been reported as balking at being assigned to Johnny Gotzelig's Kansas City team in the American Association, left last night for his new assignment and will play tonight against Omaha. The Chicago Bruins played tight defensive basketball for 30 minutes and then let go with a lashing 10-minute offense to beat the Oshkosh All-Stars 34-32 last night in the 132nd Armory. The visitors, who had come to town with the prestige of 10 victories and 11 National League games, never were able to break away for one of their typical sustained scoring rushes. From the moment when Bill Hapick sank a free throw to make it 15-14 early in the third quarter, the Bruins retained the lead, though at times their advantage was none too comfortable. For the first 3 quarters, both teams demonstrated that close guarding is not one of the lost arts. As a result, the first period ended with the score only 8-7 in favor of the Bruins, and at the half they were tied 12-12. The third quarter was marked by the same snug defense, the Bruins leading 19-15. As the last quarter began, the Bruins stepped away as though they were going to make victory certain. 2 baskets by Mike Novak, another by Hapick, and free throws by Wibbs Coutts and Hapick ran the Bruins score to 27, while the Oshkosh boys were getting 3 free throws for an 18-point total. Then the Oshkosh players returned with some spectacular offensive work. When Novak went out on fouls, the Bruins were leading by only 32-28 with 3.5 minutes to play. Erwin Prassi promptly flipped in a one-handed shot at a range of 20 feet to cut the Bruins' advantage to only 1 basket. Ray Adams, who replaced Novak, eased the situation with a free throw, and Hapick added another to give the Bruins a 4-point lead. Oshkosh remade its last points on Herman Whitaker's basket. Notre Dame, Indiana, January 22nd. Captain Eddie Riska, forward from Chicago, will be lost to the Notre Dame basketball squad for an indefinite period due to a cracked bone in his left foot, it was learned today. The injury to the high-scoring forward occurred in the first half of Monday's overtime victory at Syracuse. Riska did not play the second half. X-ray pictures today reveal the crack, which trainer Eugene Scrap Iron Young said will bench Riska from 3 to 5 weeks. He has 129 points for 12 games to date, as compared with Cy Singer's 84 for second place. Bernie Crimmins was shifted from guard to forward today. Chuck Butler, Chicago sophomore, Crimmins, Steve Bagaris, and Ralph Vincigora are the most likely candidates for Riska's post, with Butler holding the inside track. The loss of Riska is a serious blow to Notre Dame's hopes for ending Michigan State's 6-game winning streak here Saturday night. The Spartans ended winning chains of Creighton, Temple, and Long Island, which ranged from 6 to 9 games each. Notre Dame has won 5 in a row. Spartan stars include Max Hindeman, center, and Bob Phillips, guard from Gary, Indiana. Detroit, Michigan, January 22nd. Omer Walter O. Briggs of the Detroit Tigers, breaking a club precedent, disclosed today that pitcher Buck Newsome last year was paid $30,000, including bonuses. Briggs, making the announcement from his winter home in Miami Beach, Florida, said nothing of Newsome's salary for 1941, but it was assumed here that it would be considerably higher in view of Newsome's big season last year and Briggs' practice of rewarding good work with salary increases. Owner Briggs' statement, released through the Tiger offices here, said, "Because of the many inquiries, I have decided to relax on the rule we have regarding the amounts of salaries and the signing of players. Last year, Buck Newsome received $30,000, which included his bonuses, and he has signed his 1941 contract." Previously, reliable sources had intimated that Newsome, not Bob Feller of the Cleveland Indians, had become the highest-paid pitcher in baseball's history at a salary in excess of $30,000. In keeping with an unwritten law of the Tigers that salaries are never mentioned publicly, the talkative Newsome won't say a word. It is believed, however, that Buck will draw a higher salary than that to be paid to Bob Feller, whom Cleveland signed yesterday for a reported $30,000. Winner of 13 straight games and a World Series star, Newsome in 1940 enjoyed his finest season in a long career in the major leagues. He won 21 games and lost 5 during the regular season, and in pitching 264 innings, was surpassed only by Bob Feller, John Rigney of the White Sox, and Dutch Leonard of Washington. Briggs, reputed to be baseball's highest-paying club owner, has let it be known that he pays off on performance. Some irony, therefore, creeps into the Tiger situation. With Newsom given a raise, Hank Greenberg likely to retain his reported $36,000 and rewards to others due for the 1940 championship. The Tiger payroll apparently is on the uptrend. Pay goes up, but the Tigers say the experts are going down. Last year, the team was known as an old man's club, and forecasters don't give it much chance to retain that title. To retain the title. Barred from trading with other American League clubs, the champions plan to go along with virtually the personnel of 1940. Cleveland, Ohio, January 22nd. When informed today that Buck Newsom will receive more than $30,000 from the Detroit Tigers this year, President Alva Bradley of the Cleveland Indians declared, Bob Feller still is the highest paid pitcher in baseball. He was the highest paid last year, too. When Feller signed his 1941 contract yesterday, Indian officials said he definitely was the best paid hurler in Major League history. Sports writers figured the contract must represent $30,000 against the $27,500 Feller was supposed to have received last year. Detroit sources assumed Newsom's 1941 contract must call for more than $30,000. So does Bob's, Bradley reported. Feller still is the highest paid. Bradley announced that Feller received a substantial increase this year. Endorsements and other incomes are estimated to net Feller an additional $10,000 this year. Feller last year won 27 games. Los Angeles, California, January 22nd. Lou Navikoff, whom the Los Angeles Baseball Club sold to the Chicago Cubs for $100,000, set out today for the Long Beach oil fields to hunt a job. My family and I like to eat, Navikoff explained, and I don't know of any other way to keep groceries on the table until the Cubs start giving me some salary checks. The outfielder has a wife and 2 children. New York, January 22nd. For the second time this winter, concern was felt today when it was learned that Babe Ruth was suffering from another attack of gripe. At his apartment, it was reported that the former home run monarch is confined to his bed with a heavy cold and a sore throat. Although his condition is not considered serious, his physician has ordered 2 nurses kept in attendance. Mrs. Ruth said tonight that the babe's temperature, which had reached 101 in the morning, had returned to normal and he seemed to be well on the way to recovery. As to comment on the report from Seattle that Ruth was being mentioned along with several others, notably Gabby Hartnett and Kai Kyler, as possible successors to manager Jack Lelevelt, who died Monday of a heart attack, the Babe said he knew nothing about any such offer. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, January 22nd. Tom Stidham, head coach and athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, has been selected by the Marquette University Athletic Board to succeed John L. Patty Driscoll, resigned, it was reported tonight. The report was neither confirmed nor denied at Marquette. Reliable informants said signing of Stidham, who has conferred with Marquette officials, depends upon the former Haskell Indian Stars obtaining a release from Oklahoma, where his contract has 2 years to run. The only comment forthcoming from the university was no contract has been signed by Stidham. And that is sports, and that is the news for Thursday, January 23rd, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a swell day.